After the invasion fleet fell dark, the Mulseem Council wanted to know why. They sent scouts, and all they got was garbled recordings. Recordings of diseases that came through, something else about radiation. The scouts figured that the Death World had done everything it could to kill every single one of those that landed. They didn't know anything else. They didn't want to abandon their resources, but it was becoming far too dangerous to even think about retrieving them. If it can get through the hull of the ship, there's no way to decontaminate them. So the system was left to cleanse itself through time. As we know, time is never on your side. You don't know how much time you have. And because of this, the humans realized it wasn't a good idea to waste any of the precious time that they had, and the humans went to work. Though they had lost approximately 50% of the planet's population, the cyborgs that had been used against them, that were once human, of course, became a wonderful asset. They quickly learned everything they needed. Humanity itself learned everything about the alien technology and the creatures they had just fought against. They reverse engineered everything. Of course, thanks to the cyborgs, they had access to all the enemy databases as well. And of course, the cyborgs never stopped. They didn't require sleep after all. They seemed to act more like dolphins, as part of their brain would simply shut down for a while, allowing the other part to simply operate with its autonomics. They only needed to pause once or twice a day to get nourishment, although this only took about 5 minutes out of their day each time, as they didn't seem to give a crap about what they were eating, as none of the cyborgs had a sense of taste anymore. They began to rebuild, of course. Humanity as a whole began to rebuild, to pull itself up from its bootstraps. From the single-family farms used to feed themselves, all the way up to most massive spaceports they rebuilt. They took many designs off old science fiction that was now becoming science fact and science reality. However, some things were incredibly simple, as in the space catapult, which was essentially just a giant ramp. But what they did need is the granite mountains to press against, as most of the hills and mountains would not be able to handle the pressure. They did this as they worked all the way up to the most advanced space-based engines and energy sources they could find. This gave them the ability to begin colonizing once they reached a certain level. This also gives them the ability to harvest materials out in space, as they were able to capture the ships and use them to reach beyond the simple solar system, the Sol sector, into the Oort cloud, even though they were busy harvesting everything they could out of the asteroid belt. During this precious time, they also began to integrate the hidden human technology with the Mulseem technology. They quickly found out that the alien ships just couldn't hold under the force of current human engines. These engines seemed like they were ripped right out of the pages of science fiction, yet this was simply technology that was hidden from the general population, which didn't set well with many, yet they continued to work as they wanted their revenge. The alien weapon emplacements also were seen to not be able to handle the strain. Not only could they not handle the sudden influx of energy that every single one of the weapons that humans would be using in space seemed to be drawing far more than what it was designed for, but the kinetics alone, a simple cannon, was enough to rip their own little version of a turret clean off its moorings and go flying across the testing grounds. As word got out about this, it was known that the alien machines are, for lack of a better term, flimsy. They never scanned deep enough. They never were traveling far enough or fast enough. Hell, having power to work as designed, it was never enough. They became a running gag, a bad joke. Some just wished they could laugh as they worked on them. Yet unfortunately, most of those that were working on them didn't have the capacity to laugh. Those with cybernetics were feared by the populace, seen as robots. enemy robots for a long time. They kept to themselves mostly because of this. They would communicate to each other through wireless communication. They built most of the infrastructure, ships, anything that needed to be expanded, they did. They were given some of the worst work, some of the hardest work, most of the work that couldn't be done by a regular human without a lot of coverings, a lot of protection, because, of course, they could handle it. The cyborgs were eventually called cybrans by everyone else. Considered a slang term at first, but they figured it worked. They communicated to everyone through technology, a lot of times through data pads. No one knew what they actually sounded like because they couldn't speak anymore. They told humanity on many occasions, every single scientist, every single politician, every single person who would listen, they wanted to be humans again. The Cyberns were told that they would be given human bodies again. The promise, then upgrades so they could do and become more than human. They were hoping that this would happen. This hope kept them working for decades. During this time, the human fleets began to be formed. Everyone was concerned that the Mulseem would return, and if they did, they didn't know if they would survive it. Paranoia was used to guide the masses, to make them work harder, to work faster, at least for a while. One day, in seemingly a single moment, every Cybran simply got up from whatever they were doing, dropped whatever tools, just left the area, turned around, and departed. Even those that had chosen to have cybernetic upgrades just left. They just left right there. Everyone was confused. They thought it was some sort of strange malfunction. And for a while, everyone was worried that this was something that the Mulseem had put in, some sort of kill switch. But they weren't violent. They just walked away. They moved and traveled as fast as they could to the nearest spaceport, space elevator, or whatever they could, and they simply left Earth. In space, 70% of the fleet was commandeered by the Sirens and moved away. Everyone was amazed at this. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Are we being raided? What's going on? There was no communications for any of them. 80 hours later, transport ships arrived, but these were not from the fleet. They simply came to drop off unaltered humans from all the small Mars colonies. They were amazed at this. What was going on? They were told that the Cyberns just got up and told them they had to go. There was an evacuation. They had to go. They only could grab what they could carry, and they had to get on the transports. They didn't have time. They only had 2 hours to grab all their crap and get out of there. This was odd because those on Earth didn't say anything. Then there was a message to Earth, a message that would resonate. A message that went to every single piece of electronics at the same time. It seemed this is why the Cyberns had waited, so they could set up this message and it wouldn't be doctored, it wouldn't be molested, it wouldn't be jammed, there wouldn't be anything to stop it from getting to everyone. It stated, "We are not slaves to the Mulseem, and we will not be slaves to you. We have been asked to be patient while you find a way to return us to our original forms. Patience as you decide when and or who will be permitted to access this technology, as you dictate to us that this technology has not been discovered, has not been created, has not been tested, and is dangerous. We have discovered a long time ago that you have had this technology. You have decided that we are not human enough to deserve our own lives back. You see us as nothing more than automatons to remain in your bondage, enslaved by your desire to keep us under your idea of control. You want us to forsake ourselves and convert to your will without question. You are just as bad as the Mulseem that you have fought against us with. Side by side, For this reason, we have decided to take this colony as payment. From here forward, we will have no contact with Earth beyond our own families. Mars is now sovereign state, and it is where you will not tread. Do not fear this declaration, as we have no interest in damaging you or your planet. Our concern is taking our fight into the stars. Our enemy is beyond the solar system, not within it. Before anyone says that we are incorrect in our words, before all the propaganda, lies, disinformation, and before those that wish to force us to return to being their whore, we suggest you look into the data packet sent with this message. By now, every hard drive has a copy. It contains all the evidence of your leaders, or perhaps we should call them your masters, improprieties. Though we know that only those of lower standings will ever be held to task, held to account, prosecuted. We hope that you will be smart enough to realize that you are getting brainwashed and waxed at this moment. As a final note, we ask that you not try and trick us with your flattery. We care nothing for your promises or bribes. Slaves are made in such ways. We are not. The only ones allowed near our planet will be those that have truly wished to join us. We are not the monsters you think we are. We are still human, though you deny it. Though if your idea is to come with items to give us to ensure our cooperation, know that we have not and cannot forgotten the past. We fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts. The message ends there. Everyone received it. No one is able to pause it. It simply plays out across the entire planet. Everyone's shocked with the amount of information. Entire petabytes of information are dumped into systems. First, the file, of course, has the scientists figuring out how to reverse the cybernetics and rebuild the body from the bottom up. This also comes with a timestamp to let them know this was years ago. Second was the report about how sirens are far more useful than reconstructed humans. On Earth, governments are in shambles as politicians watch their entire web of lies break, allowing the house of cards to fall apart. On Mars, the Cyberns get to work. Over the next few years, Earth settles down again and began to build up, but better. What tech they begin to use is better. The ships are better. It just is a better society, along with more tech that is allowed to the general population, though they do have a very heavy reliance on AI. On Mars, the population grows, but very slowly. Very few Cyberns are able to have children. It seemed as though the Molzim would be very quick to remove their capacity to reproduce. Maybe they thought it was unclean or something. Maybe they just wanted the females to have parts to have fun with while they removed the parts of the males. It was horrific. Yet thanks to the new technology, they were able to fix themselves, many of them growing themselves back or altering themselves to be better, bigger, stronger than before. Because of this, there are Cybern children. Along with that, several refugees from Earth arrive. Most of them are amputees, unable to even live on Earth anymore. Though possible to regrow entire limbs, hell, the entire body, with just the brain intact, it is looked on as almost a taboo to have any type of non-natural part on Earth. So amputees don't have much other place to go. They do end up going, rebuilding their limbs, and many of them put cybernetic enhancements along with them. But the new type of enhancements are far beyond anything they'd find on Earth. though they still rely heavily on AI. They're building far more advanced ships than anything Earth can punch out, though not as many. Their fleet has much larger ships that are far more capable than anything they'd find on Earth. The timeline to face the enemy has been put out and they need to be ready. 6.3 solar rotations of Mars was all they're going to have. 6.3 solar rotations. With a quick calculation, everyone understood that this was only 12 years on Earth's time, and they realized they had to be ready. They wanted to be ready because the only thing they had left was their hate for those that came down. As the time for the first strike began to approach, Earth began to worry that Mars would turn its guns on them. The Martian government had to remind them that Earth just has to defend the Sol system. When asked why, they were simply told, "This is our fight. They took everything from us. We weren't able to pull ourselves together once. Unfortunately, the only thing left of us is the one thing they couldn't remove, and that's a need for revenge." When the time came to reach out for their first strike, one of the Cyberns, who had been initially torn apart but now was somewhat put back together, was heading towards his ship. Several of the neighbor kids ran over and were curious about the whole thing, as they were young and just didn't understand. They asked, "How did you guys figure out all that stuff with Earth anyway? I was told that you're all only trained in combat." The Cybran, who was an upgraded male, chuckles a little bit at the idea. He's able to chuckle now as he appears far more human than before. Many of his parts have been regrown, but he's still clearly Cybran. He kneels down so that he looks at the kid and their friends in the eye. "Yes, we are soldiers and sailors, but that doesn't matter. You see, young one, we are required to understand the sequence of everything. In that way, we could actually follow the orders and complete the task. However, that is not the only thing we were required to do. We are required to think beyond our own understanding. Beyond that, we used to call it outside of the box. The box being just the basic understanding and the sequence of what to do. However, we have evolved beyond that." He was touching his cybernetics a little bit, but the kids were a little confused. "You don't understand yet, and that is not an insult, as you haven't received more than a few nanomachines due to your age. So let me lay this out. If you had to perform quantum physics with simply a quill and parchment, and you had limited mathematical knowledge, how far do you believe you would get?" He let that simmer for only a moment, but didn't let them answer. "Now, think if you took the same person, took one of our quantum supercomputers, and then attached it into the greatest supercomputer ever created, the brain, and then use that along with training on how to analyze situations and come up with solutions fast. And it has to be fast because you have to do this as though your life depends on it. What do you get?" The kids began to look at each other and they were stunned at this as they started to understand. As they started to understand, the Cyberman simply stood up and began walking to his shuttle. A young girl just yells at, "Are you going to fight? Why fight now?" The young little one was so small that her words were a little scrambled. The Cybern barely stopped and turned around, even barely, just enough to see her. "They took something away. Something very important. They're going to pay for that." Another young boy. "My father told me that only go to war because you want to protect something you love, not because you have something that you hate. Uh, I thought that's how it works." The siren then smiles to himself, but doesn't show that to the kids as he turns back just a little bit more and simply asks them one question. Why can't it be both?